So I want to say, first thing first, that we are not as divided as we think. I know social media and the news and all the stuff, they want to show what's divisive in the world, right? And of course, without question, we need that. We're social animals. We want to know what's scary on the other side of the Serengeti. But we're not there anymore with that. We're walking beings with a computer in our pockets. And then I think about every single person that's in here right now, that none of you, on surface, seem the same to me. I've spent a lot of time with most of you in here. With the time that I have spent, I've found that more and more and more we have things in common, way more than what divides us. And I hope to give you a short disquisition on what I think about that. So, I started off as a child. I think some of you did too, probably, right? I was tremendously and unfortunately abandoned often as a child. My parents, I don't blame them. I don't give them any animosity towards how I feel towards them. But I recognize what took place by two 25-year-olds who decided to have a child. But what it did do in return is make me feel isolated from society in a way that I never thought I would, honestly. So I spent most of my time in my life feeling like the whole world had a clue into the way the world works. And you all knew this thing, but you didn't talk about it because you all knew you knew it. But therefore, I didn't know the answer. So I felt very isolated for most of my life and separate from the rest of the world until I picked up an instrument and I found Jimi Hendrix. And I learned pretty quickly that there's other people in the world who are saying something similar about the things that we have in common. I spent my time going through playing shows in the East Coast, and then I got to Los Angeles. Then the time came where I played more and more shows, and I got more and more established in who I wanted to be as a person. And I determined that I needed to find a better name than just a self-titled name, something that was bigger than just me. At the same time, and unbeknownst to me, this was a parallel. It was a parallel thing that took place. It's quite all right. It's no big deal. It's all good. Hopefully you find out where you're going. You heard me? Oh, nice. So, unbeknownst to me, I was reading about myths, metaphor, storytelling, because I wanted to tell more stories, and I wanted to tell stories better as a musician. And that's when I stumbled upon Theseus and the Minotaur. Now, some of you maybe know this. Some people. I'm sure some people are nodding their head, especially people who spend enough time with me, they know about this fucking story already. That's interesting. I don't know what that is, but this story is really great because I was sitting in my room at a time that I was at one of my lowest points in my life. It was about 5 years ago, in the beginning of the pandemic, reading this story. And Theseus was a soldier in Crete. And he lived in a time where Crete was owned by Athens. And the king of Athens, King Minos, had a minotaur locked away in a labyrinth. And every year he would send 6 soldiers. He would send 6 soldiers to come and fight the minotaur, but essentially they were just being eaten by the minotaur. So first thing first I find out when I read this, I see, okay, the minotaur comes from it's a Greek story, so please bear with me. It's a Greek myth. That being said, King Minos' wife had an affair with a bull, very Greek. That's what they always do. The Greek myths are just wild. I read this story once where the woman was like, her spouse didn't write back to her, so she wanted to throw herself in the river. I'm like, damn, really? All right, fuck, okay, we're getting there. Cool. But because she had the affair and he didn't have it in him to kill the Minotaur, but he also didn't want it parading out into the world. There's your pride and your shame, right? These two lives of potentialities going on in this king. He stuck it away in the labyrinth until Theseus comes along and says, I can destroy that Minotaur. He feels that he can, and he finds out he's the son of Poseidon, so of course, any person who has any, Superman's father, son of gods, so on and so forth, you're pushed and compelled by this thing that's pushing you across the world that you can't make answers for. You can't put to logic, but something is compelling you to do something. Some of you have been here for that same reason. I'm sure you all have felt times where you felt compelled to do something that there's no logic that can explain to you why you should do it. Yet here you are right now, comfy, nice in an AC department. So Theseus finally goes to this Minotaur. Now he knows and he thinks to himself, I can destroy this Minotaur. I can take this Minotaur out. But he's not too sure if he's able to get out of the labyrinth, because the labyrinth is, as usual, this big circle, dynamic, complicated maze that you have to get out of. However, King Minos' daughter, named Ariadne, hands him a thread. Some of the Greek myths have it to be golden, some have it to be red. My favorite color is red. I'm going to go with red. And she gives him this thread to go into the labyrinth, unwind the thread as you go into the middle of the center of the labyrinth, find that Minotaur, slay that Minotaur, and then roll yourself back out by way of the thread. That thread itself is called a clue. The Greek term for it is C-L-E-W. And it's right in that moment I realized, there goes my band name. That's exactly the one I want. Because these are all symbols, right? The people at that time, they read these stories as metaphor. And a lot of Eastern beliefs, they still read their stuff as metaphor. And metaphor is myth is a metaphor that is recognizing the concretization of a story. Whatever the geographical landscape is in the society at the time, the people of the time take those makeups of this world. For us, for example, we'll use the 405 as a metaphor, right? I'm in line at Ross. It's like the 405 here. There's your metaphor. But those people also recognize the story that's being told from behind it. And that thread for me is the tie back to the rest of the world. So if I'm reading this myth right, you have Theseus, who fights his Minotaur in the middle, slays him in the center, comes out by way of the thread from Ariadne. Which, by the way, if anybody has seen Inception here, yes? Great, fantastic. Great movie. Christopher Nolan writes the movie where Leonardo DiCaprio has to go into the dreams to steal bank heists or codes or whatever it is. Point is, he goes into someone's psyche, and he needs to map out the psyche for the person. So who does he go and enlist? The actress at the time, the character's name is Ariadne. It's the same name here. So there's your metaphor, right? And it reminded me that no matter how ancient and historic these things are, they still speak to us because the story's being told today. So regardless whether there's a Minotaur not actually walking the earth, it's with the message behind what the meaning is. So that being said, if I may, I want to break down some more of these metaphors, because I started finding these threads in a multitude of other stories, myths, religions, conversations, daily life that we're having. So the first thing that comes to me is actualizing that, because if I'm going to sit with myself beyond the actual concretization of the story, then I am the actual metaphor walking and living in this world. The monster that he's fighting within, in that center, is the monster that sits within me. I am not the physical soldier living in Crete. I am the person who is going through the maze of life to find the big bad, recognize the big bad where it is, and see myself in it, demolish it, and then go back into the world by way of the thread. That really pulls you away from thinking so much about the concrete of the fact and the fiction and the fake news and real news and what's wrong and what's right. And those things obviously matter, of course. But what really matters is the human experience that every one of us have walking and going through here every single day. I don't resonate with the light bulbs that are here. I am the illumination that was constant throughout this. These lights will burn out at some point, and they'll be changed out because everything comes and goes. But the illumination is one that is the same, and that's my consciousness, my awareness that is here. And I think it's the same thing when I see all of you. So we have here this minotaur, right? The thread is that consciousness. Then what is the labyrinth? The labyrinth is the dynamism of what? Who knows? When I see the circle, the first thing I think about is Plato describing the psyche as a circle. He describes the potentialities of a thought, of an emotion, of a feeling, of a revelation, whatever it is that comes up, goes back into where it came, the void, comes around and circle again. Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, took that and made this circle here. I find this one of my favorite images, even though it's so simple, because you have this total psyche that's right here. This is everything you've ever experienced psychologically. This line goes across, and what's above it is your consciousness. Every single thing you've tasted, smelled, seen, experienced, felt is remembered up here. But then Jung is smart enough to put a square here because the rest of it is circles. That's the man-made part. That's ego. That's what divides us from each other. That's what makes someone see somebody who doesn't look like them and say, I don't like that person. Or I'm just going to hold on to my stuff a little stronger because I don't know where that person is. In some places that matters, but in the big picture, there's no difference between any of us. But he puts it in a box because it's not like the circle of the rest of the world. This building, beautiful as it is made by right angles, rectangles, squares, all these things that hold something up because it's man-made. But go out in nature, it's got nothing to do with rectangles. The job is to recognize the square is only that small compared to the huge, huge human psyche that stands here. Everything under it is the subconscious. And instead of recognizing with that square, you recognize with the center of that circle, which also happens to be probably one of your most darkest points in your life. So when I look at that labyrinth, I see the dynamism of someone's psyche, my psyche. And Theseus being you, going into that labyrinth and slaying that minotaur, slaying that monster that has brought your biggest fear. For me, it was isolation. For me, it's feeling divided from every single person. It's not my job to hide the minotaur in the labyrinth. It's my job to go in there and recognize and face it, to individualize, to amalgamate with that darkness. He doesn't ever drive the wheel, that's for sure, but he sits in the back, he opens up a map, and he tells me when to watch out for speed traps. In the center of it, you have this monster, this minotaur, right? Now, of course, in every movie we watch, we see monsters as this breathing, horrible, demonstrous thing that wants to come and attack us. And it's external. But then when you break down the etymology of the word monster itself, when I looked that up, blew my mind. Monster is Latin. The etymology for it, the first one is monstrum. It means divine omen. Divine omen. No matter where you believe on the spiritual, non-spiritual side, the word divinity, of course, means something without and within as well. It's a derivative of the word monet, to make think. And that is a derivative of the word monir, means to remind. So the etymological word itself of monster, which is we've seen a multitude of times in waking life, in our dreams, and on television and in film, is to remind you to think about the divineness within. There's your clue right there. As soon as I read that, I started remembering Star Wars. People Star Wars fans here? Yes? Sort of? I got a yes. I got a huge smile, a very great smile. Okay, fantastic. There's that great dream where I'm not even much of a Star Wars fan, but I appreciate the myths that are being told in there, the storyline that's being told in there. Where that scene of, and I forget which one it is, so forgive me. Don't beat me up afterwards for saying this wrong, but Luke Skywalker goes into a forest in his dream. There's your forest again. There's your complexity, your psyche. He goes to fight Darth Vader in this dream. He slays him. He cuts his head off. And he sees his own face inside that mask. There's your monster within. These stories, these metaphors are saying the same exact thing of the human experience. One from a Greek myth and then one from the 70s. I can't explain to you, I can't express to you how much every day I find these in existence. The untouchable thing that connects all of us. And you only find it once you slay the monster first. I also love that Ariadne is the one that gave him the thread, this feminine energy, this mother goddess technique that gives him the thread that goes back to life. Why? Well, because of course, women energy, feminine energy is the life giver. It's the one that gives us everything. That's why it's Mother Earth. From there, since I found one in Star Wars and I found one in Greek myths, I wondered if there were any other ones. So I started doing research. This is over a course of 5 or so years I've been doing this work. Lately, it's felt like a waterfall, but when it started, it was just a trickle in a pond. So one of the ones I found next was this story here, which is a Norse myth, where these 3 Norse deities, for lack of a better term, when in this belief of Norse, when someone is born, when you were born, these 3 women pull out a thread, and when they determine the end of your life, they cut that thread. So your actual existence of life is determined in this practice, in this belief, by the length of the thread. And these 3 women are called the Fates. I mean, if we're going to keep going into metaphor and symbolism and etymology of words, every single dialogue that we use is based upon symbolic understanding. We speak in metaphors every single day. I'm falling in love. She's drop dead gorgeous. What's the word that we say as millennials here? Oh, adulting. We're adulting. I'm adulting. That's taking the noun, making it into a verb. That's a very Shakespearean thing to do, which, by the way, Shakespeare was the king of using metaphor. So I kept looking, and I just wanted to find more of these thread motifs. And they happen to be some sitting right at my feet. As a Buddhist, we have, what's the term? I can't think of it, but documents, books, doctrines by the Buddha. And these are just 2 options. There's tons of them. Probably most of you know it as Karma Sutra. But we have the Heart Sutra, the Lotus Sutra, and there's tons of them. The Buddha has he's expounded 85,000 stories. A lot of them mean sutra. The word sutra itself means to suture together with a thread. Here we go again. Some culture used whatever they had in their region to talk about the mystery of the human experience. Whatever it is. Whether they took it practical or whether they took it metaphorical, fine. That's totally fine. That's the part that links us together. That's the part that we recognize in the world, that's okay where you stand. I'll meet you right where you are. We're walking this human experience together. When you're talking about something in the world, and it's your problem and I'm giving you advice, you're Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. I'm the Tin Man, the lion, the scarecrow, and I'm Toto. When I'm telling you about my problems in life and you're listening to me, then it's reversed. But I can't make you walk that yellow brick road, and you can't make me walk mine. But we can do it together, that's for sure. And that yellow brick road winds and moves and weaves and paves and turns like a thread all the way to Oz. And when you get to Oz, you recognize this huge building, this emerald city. And when you walk in there and you look behind the curtains, you realize Oz is just like you. So then what? You go back to there's no place like home is where the heart is. This is at a temple I went to for a good while. These monks actually taught me a lot about Buddhism. I spent a lot of time with these monks here. First thing first, I found that no matter how crazy things can get in Koreatown, you can still be peaceful. And then two, I learned how much these monks love professional wrestling. It's beside the point. It's got nothing to do with this story. It's just hilarious to watch a monk do this to me. You can't see me. Like, this is ridiculous. Anyway, this is during New Year's, these Theravada monks. And I'm a Mahayana Buddhist, but I spent time with the Theravada Buddhists because it's more of the root of Buddhism. My friend here, Bhante Panyaloka, this is during New Year's, where he took this string and passed it around to every single person. And they chant, and we meditate, and we sit there during New Year's. And for me, it represents two things. One, we are all, metaphorically speaking, Buddha consciousness. The recognition of the impermanence of the physical self, but the permanence of the conscious self, the peace that you find when the waters are still. The Buddha says, if you calm the waters, you can see straight through it. So you calm the mind, and you can see clearly. Since it's tied to the Buddha, you can see that tie-in. What it also says to me is, if any one of these people here move, everybody else feels the string. There's your metaphor again of how connected we are. That's karma. What you do has action. Karma, the definition of karma, one of them is fruitive action. Literally, giving fruit, giving life, the action out into the world. From there, I remember that there's one in Hindu myth. It's called the net of Indra. If any of you have taken your acid or mushrooms right now, this is the perfect time for it to kick in, because there's a lot. It's one of my favorite stories, though, because like I said earlier, the Eastern practitioners, Buddhists, Jains, Hindus, they still see this and they read these stories, and they, for us at least, it's secondary whether it actually happened or didn't, because we're looking at the message behind it, the metaphor behind it. So this is what's called Indra's net, and it's an immeasurable and expansive amount of net of gems, jewels, that goes the span of the universe. And when you look in each and every one of these, it reflects the other. The moment you look into the jewel, every other jewel around it is reflected. And I feel that same thing metaphorically when I talk to you. I see your mother, I see your father, I see your friends. I see who you want to be, who you were, who you are right in this moment. I see some of me in you as well, because you are the gem tied to the net of which that reflects me and everybody else around you. We're tied to that by way of consciousness. We may look different and have different beliefs, but we are sitting here in awareness of the here and now. That's the real tie-in for us. In my opinion, that's the only tie-in, honestly. Everything else comes and goes. I did ancient, I did Eastern, and I started looking around for the Abrahamic practices. And I found one of the ones that was really, really fantastic. I found this when I was reading. I had a cold and I had no voice. And when I found all this stuff, I got up and I couldn't speak about it. So I'm just like, and then coughing, and then sneezing, and then whatever, you know. This one is a story of Judah and Tamar. It's in Genesis. Judah and Tamar have twins. And upon birth, the midwife is sitting with Tamar, the mother, giving birth, which, by the way, if we're going to go to names and etymology again, Tamar itself means date tree in Hebrew. So it means tree that gives fruit. Yet again, here's your life-giving motif. Do we notice these patterns that keep happening over and over again? These constant motifs that keep being told to us, no matter the region whatsoever? That's the most beautiful part to me. So upon birth, one hand extends out of the womb. The midwife sees the first hand that's out, and over that child's wrist, she ties a red thread. The hand recoils back in, and the second child comes out first. And from there, the midwife names the child Phares, which today we say the word Perez. Phares means to breach, to break through, right? The second child's name was Sarah, which means to shine, dawn, beginning, a breaking through of something new. There's your metaphor again of something extending outward. That's your Old Testament. That's what Christianity, Catholicism, Judaism is studying based on. You go to the New Testament, and it ties the lineage from before and through far as that second child all the way to Jesus of Nazareth, which again is about a story of a person with a fatherly God, having a conversation about the peace that's within, and finding out the unity that's here. So this red thread ties you all the way down to the lineage of Jesus Christ. That hit me much more, even not as a Christian or Jewish, being Jewish. It hit me deeper in a level because it'd been right here in front of me my entire existence, living in this Western culture. And you don't have to be a Christian or a Buddhist or a Hindu or believe in Greek myths to recognize that. You don't have to watch Star Wars to believe in it. I'm not even comparing them. I'm comparing the story that happens behind all of this. That's the beautiful part. I remember that at some point, no matter how much I love studying all of these things that are ancient, I have to find out how it appeals to me. And the first thing I picked up was being a musician. This symphony, this entire orchestra is ran on strings, by the way. If this lady here, for example, any of these here, if one of them on their cello plays one string, you have these vibrations of frequency going out into our ears, into our hearts. She plays two strings, now it harmonizes. The person next to her plays as well. Now we have strings making a unison of sound. And when everybody else starts to do it, you have this one overall sound made by small, little micro or mono sounds. It's like the artist, like the pointillism, the painting that you make little dots, but when you zoom out, it makes the big picture. But what happens after that? You listen to the music, and it affects you. It hits you. Again, the concretization of the type of cello comes secondary to how it appeals to you as a person. I can, by practicality, by science, by understanding theory, show every one of you how to write a symphony over time. But I cannot explain to you why it makes you cry, why it appeals to you so deeply, why it moves you. And that's the part that we should be sitting into more often. The human experience that binds us all. It's really hard to do that, obviously, because we live in a society where you have to be tough and strong and ready and always prepared, and you got to be this way, you have to have your chest out, and you can't cry, and I'm not here for it anymore. I'm here for vulnerability. I want to see you, every one of you, exactly where you are. And I'm not worried anymore. I'm not scared about going into that cave to fight the Minotaur. I'm not worried about it whatsoever. Because why? Because I know exactly where that Minotaur is behind him is the thing I need the most. I didn't run out of things to study and research. I just wanted more, something else that was outside of a story or a belief that doesn't necessarily affect me in my walking, waking life. As beautiful as it is, it appeals to me, it brings me peace, but I got to go in the world and converse and be with people who don't see it the way I see it. So I wanted to find some string motifs that worked out in our modern day. So I picked up my phone and I looked on the internet. This is the point that I'm making. If we look at these old ancient ways of telling stories, and we recognize that in the geographical landscape, they are using what they're familiar with, be it animal, be it nature, be it humanity, be it clothing, to talk about that experience. And so are we. We're using the internet, a net to connect us all by way of our thoughts and our consciousness. And I know all of you, or some of you, would say, Cesar, the internet is not good for you, right? And we all think that. And of course, there's some truth to that. But there's also good things as well. Just like every one of those stories that we've read before here. The times in which they were written had a lot of horrible things going on and a lot of amazing, beautiful, blissful things as well. In the center, in the full circle of the human experience of that time, there was a minotaur, their metaphorical minotaur, that the society couldn't get together. And that's why we told the story, because it was to breach through to something better. So whether you're a spiritual person or a believer or a religious person, or you're an atheist, you're secular, you can't push away the understanding of the human experience. That's where we all are right now. Try not to think about it. Try not to think about this. Serious, don't think about it. Pink elephant. You all thought about pink elephants, right? Yeah? Yes? Great. And then you thought about yourself thinking about the pink elephant. That's the awareness right there. That's your consciousness. That's who you really are. This changes. Clearly, you all know me. My hair has changed a lot lately. My mood has changed. My life has changed. My beliefs have changed. But one thing has been the same, my consciousness. Then I started reading through the internet, I learned about quantum mechanics. It's a study of matter and what it's derived of, how it breaks down, yet again. I guess perhaps if I may say the etymological understanding of matter. And here we have matter, which is what you and I are. You are matter and you matter. It's made up of molecules, it's made up of atoms, nucleus, neutron, proton, electron, made of neutrons and quarks. Again, titles to describe something that we've experienced. And in the middle of all those, there are these small, squiggly lines in the middle of the center of matter. And in this quantum study, all things, since they're made of matter, has this in the center of it. And this practice, or this belief, is called string theory. We're just taking the same things and talking about the connection of the mystery of who we are. There's no difference. It may look different, but it's not different. The times change, the story changes, the belief changes, the practice changes, how you go about in the world changes, the climate changes, the politics change. You individually change. None of you are who you are when you were 5 years old, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, so on and so forth. But your consciousness has been the same the entire time. You are not the wave going through. You are the actual water. Every one of you. The wave is temporary. You are the water, metaphorically speaking. And I guess literally too, you're like 80% water, so there's that. So then what is real? What actually is that full permanent thing? Your position right here and now. The moment you sit here and be focused on the here and now, you have been untouched by memories of the past and fear of the future. That is eternal. Because you're breaking time and you're not worried about it. And we all know time itself is relative by this gentleman here. Which, by the way, has a quote as, there's a superior mind that revealed itself in the world of experience. That consciousness that's here. Your awareness. And I'm going to keep leaning on those words over and over again because they really matter. There's this really great story in the Hindu tradition where King Janaka, big ruler of the land, he's sleeping in his castle, in his bed, and he's waking up, or woken up. Waking up, woken up, waking up, woken up, woken, thank you. Right. And he's woken up, thank you. And he says, we're being attacked, we're under attack. He grabs his sword, he runs outside, he fights the good battle, but he loses. They take King Janaka and they throw him off out of the town. Days go on, he's crawling in the desert, suffering. He's dehydrated, he's hungry, he's tired. He's at death's door without question, and he finally reaches this woman sitting, minding her business. And he asked her for water. She says, I don't have any, but there's some just down the way. Yet again, the feminine energy gives him life. He gets to around the way and he finds the pail of water. He goes to pick it up to finally drink some of it, and a bird knocks the pail out of his hand. Water spills all over the desert. Janaka drops his head. He's crying. He's about to give up. He picks his head up. He looks around. He's back in his castle. His guards come in. They run in. They say, King Janaka, you've been screaming. Are you okay? And he looks at them, and he ponders the dream, and he says, was that real, or is this real? And they said, we don't understand what you're saying. He says, is that real, or is this real? They keep asking him different questions, and he says, is that real, or is this real? They send his 10 wives in, and they're trying to have a conversation with 10 wives, by the way. My gosh, no wonder he's sleeping so much. They send 10 wives in there, and they ask him, what's going on? What's happening with you? Tell me something. He says, is that real, or is this real? They try to entice him. They tell him to put on the skimpy suit he likes or whatever, and he's like, is that real, or is this real? Until finally, months go by. No more laws are being put in order. There's no judgments being made on anybody because he keeps saying, is that real or is this real? Until they call in this 12-year-old guru come walking in. I love when stories have the kid in the conversation because the kid, going back to that circle photo, hasn't recognized the square of the division that we've caused and made in our lives. They're still just right here in the world. All the rules we've made up in the world that helped us plenty because you're all here for it, they don't know that. They're just being natural. So I love when the story does that because they always break the person. Guru comes in, walks up to him and says, King Janaka, what is the matter? King Janaka says, is that real or is this real? He says, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Is that real or is this real? That shakes Janaka right out of his own bed. He looks over at the guru, and the guru says, when you were in your sleep and dreaming, did this feel real? Janaka says, no. The guru says, well then, when you are in your waking life now, does the dream feel real? He says, no. Then neither of them are real. Janaka's like, what the hell are you telling me? That doesn't help me at all. Like, what am I going to do with that? He says, what is real then? The guru leans into him and says, you're a consciousness that experienced it all. Your dreams have came and gone. Your days have came and gone. The age of you has came and gone. At some point, the reign of your name and your body will come and go. But the consciousness, that lied behind it the entire time. It had no smell, no taste. It didn't run out of breath. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't disassociate itself. Just straight up awareness. The same thing that all of you felt when you looked and recognized yourself thinking about the pink elephant. Not the pink elephant. Not the thinking consciousness of the pink elephant. The awareness of the pink elephant. That's your consciousness. And that makes me realize that if I am that permanent, formless thing that we take for granted every single day, then it has to be out here as well. That jewel that I mentioned earlier. So when I see you, every one of you, I see me, and I recognize I am you as well. It's the consciousness that connects us all, the awareness of being here. Capital C, consciousness. That is who we are. So then the question is, in this time right now, in this day and age where everything is so divisive, my goodness, if we're going to write the myth of who we are today in this story, in this timeline, how do we make it? How do each one of us go about the world to try to live in this world? Because we're all making up a version of this big story. We're all a part in it. We're all a jewel on that net. And if you shake that net, everybody else feels it. So how else should you go about it other than kind, compassionate, peaceful? We're writing the story right now of the thread. It's when I found all of that out is when I realized that I was never alone. I was never isolated. I was never divided. I have been here with you all every single moment of my existence. This child, not once did he ever think he would get to this space and recognize the reality of the unison, of the non-two-ness in this world. I can happily say now that I can look at him and I feel him right here. And he's been recognized and seen like we should see all children for who they are right then and there. Because for you to be kind to someone else is to be kind to yourself. And I only found that by some clue. Thank you all.